I'll begin by asking each of you about your respective roles and your interest in cancer research. So, Jenny, maybe you'd like to begin with that.
Sure. I'm Jenny Alstrom, and I am a multiple myeloma patient. And I was diagnosed in 2010. After my diagnosis, I decided to start a foundation because I saw a lot of gaps in what I wanted as a patient. And so I created the Health Tree Foundation for multiple myeloma in 2012. And we've since created lots of different programs. So I have a deep and abiding interest in multiple myeloma.
And Tanya, please.
Sure. So I am Tanya Small. I am the Global Medical Affairs Head at GSK for Oncology. And just my whole career has been focused on just fighting cancer in every way I can. Before coming to pharma, I practiced medicine as a pediatric hematologist oncologist. And, there you see the real life effects of treatment. You see the amazing progress that we've made in medicine, and also some of just the terrible outcomes that should never have happened. So those things are my ammunition to really keep fighting every day, all day, for some kind of movement forward when it comes to cancer impact.
Okay. And why is multiple myeloma such an important area of pharmaceutical research then, Tanya?
Sure, I'll kick it off and then I'll turn it over to Jenny to hear her point of view. But when it comes to multiple myeloma, I mean, there has been just significant progress made over the last, actually, just even a couple of years. There's been a lot of medicines coming in, but there still is a true inequity of care. There's just people of African descent are disproportionately affected when it comes to multiple myeloma. When you look at the mortality rate, it's doubled in Blacks when it comes to compared to the white counterparts. When you look at even when you equalize socioeconomic status, when you look at even comorbidities, when you even really try to match for that, Blacks are still less likely to receive treatment. So when you look at outcomes, there's a lot of work to be done, both from a patient advocacy standpoint, but also a pharmaceutical standpoint, as in a drug development standpoint. And so when you look from my end, when it comes to drug development, there's a lot more research that needs to be done. We need to improve access when it comes to medicines. We need to improve access when it comes to clinical trials. We need to understand the disease more and create drugs that are more tailored to different people of different descent and different outcomes. And so there's just a lot of work to be done. Like I said, the strides forward has been tremendous, but there's still an imbalance when it comes to outcomes. And so that's what a big part of our focus is. And that's actually why we really focused on Target the Future. And part of the areas that we're trying to attack is the disparity when it comes to outcomes of people of color.
I think too, in just in multiple myeloma is a disease that keeps coming back over and over again. And so there are a subset of patients that are high risk patients that don't do well, regardless of the drugs that they are given or the treatments that they're given. Patients have, like Tanya was saying, the progress in myeloma has been spectacular. We've had so many different treatment options, but still, like she said, it's not cured. And I know that I will most likely relapse again. So I've relapsed, just received a treatment back in November, and I might go for a few years and then I might have to consider another treatment. Some patients are not that lucky. They're relapsing after a year of therapy, and they're blowing through everything that we have to offer. So it's such an interesting idea that I think the Wall Street Journal said there's been more development in multiple myeloma than any other cancer. And so it's a fascinating problem to try to solve.
And to your point, I mean, we've come such a long way, but we're still not we're not a cure,
No.
and so and
we're not at even care in some situations.
Right.
So like what Tanya is saying, like the African American community is 2 to 3 times more likely to get multiple myeloma at an earlier age and at and the precursor conditions. They're more likely to get the precursor conditions of MGUS and smoldering myeloma. And so, when you look at outcomes, they should be doing better genetically, but they're not. And so we have to address getting good care for everybody because they should be living longer than their white counterparts.
Yeah. So just to piggyback off for Jenny, I think when you say why are we focused on it, it is we need to focus on it until we get to cure across the board. And so you're going to see a lot of us not stop. We'll continue to develop those drugs. We'll continue to improve our drug development. We'll continue to improve even the experience that patients have throughout their treatment journey, the experience that they have while on medicines. But we have to keep fighting until we get to the point where Jenny gets to say, I'm not going to relapse again. I don't have to worry about that. And so we're committed and we have to be.
Right. You talked there about, getting to the point where we reach a cure, but in the interim, what types of medicines are available, what types of drugs are available, and what are the limitations of those drugs, both from a patient perspective and from your perspectives in your respective companies? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, some of it is personalization. So we have this big set of tools in this toolbox. And so some of it might be sequencing. What do we combine together? What do we do first? And then how do we sequence it? What's going to get patients the most remission? Is it the immunotherapies? Are we going to do those up front? Because those have been kind of late stage in the getting approved stage. And then they're slowly bringing them up. But maybe that's what gives a patient a 10-year remission. And if somebody is diagnosed at 72, which is the average age of diagnosis, maybe they do that and then they have other options and then they're functionally cured. So it could be that, it could be sequencing, but the development continues. Like we're seeing a ton of activity from many, many different companies in this space trying to go shoot for cure. So.
Yeah, and while we do that, it's always about remembering the person that has been diagnosed with the disease. And so you'll see a lot of movement towards, even when I use the word experience, when we think about even side effect profile, until we get to a cure, the goal is to make sure that the person can still live their best life. We want to make sure that while they have the disease or while we're getting them into remission, we're not giving them the toxicities. We're not hindering their life. You'll hear sometimes I'll say it's also about making sure they don't just live, but they thrive. And so if you think about years ago, a lot of drugs had a ton of toxicities, and you're seeing now drug development really working to address those as well. So it's about understanding the disease. It's about personalizing our treatment. And then it's also about making sure we're looking at the person end to end, their experience, and how do we get them through that journey. So it's looking at it in a more comprehensive way. And I think that's a lot of our focus on top of trying to get these patients secure.
I would agree with the personalization a lot because not all myeloma is the same. Even in a patient can have like 5 different kinds of myeloma at diagnosis. And so you're not dealing with one single disease with one single drug that's going to be the ultimate cure. This is a different disease in lots of different people. And it could be genetically a different disease.
Mm-hmm.
So there were studies done in myeloma comparing Black patients in the United States to African patients, and the incidence was the same. So there's something genetically, predisposing this group to this disease, and we don't understand it. We need more patients who are joining clinical trials so we can understand it in a better way, and that's what some of this is. We're trying to do is to educate and support the patients, and then provide them the access that they need to either treatments or clinical trials.
And so, I mean, if you allow me to indulge, because I think Jenny just hit on something that is so close to my heart, and it's clinical trials. When we talk about disparities, we talk about access, but when you look at the clinical trials that, to your point, the percentage of African Americans that make up clinical trials, we're looking at what, 5 to 8%. But yet, look at the percentage that have the disease. For us to understand it better, we need to have more patients on clinical trials. That gives them more access to treatments right away, but also it makes us understand the disease better so we can develop the right drugs for the right patients. And people use that terminology a lot, but it's so important. The only way we get to really understand the differences in the disease is to study it and create the right drugs to treat it. And we have to do more, we have to do better to get more patients, diverse patients on clinical trials, so we can make the right drugs, create the right drugs for them. And I think that's where Jenny, Jenny's program, her foundation really shines. I mean, going deeply into the community, building the right infrastructure, getting patients on clinical trials so that we can actually make the right medicines for them.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Target the Future grant and the Think Tank Challenge. Why was Health Tree Foundation selected as a winner? I'm guessing you started to touch on that, and the brilliant efforts that they're working on and their initiatives. Why was that? Why were they selected as a winner?
Yeah, so just even taking a step back on why we created it, just like Jenny and I were talking about it before. There's a lot of things that have happened in terms of research and development, but there's a lot more we have to do. But more importantly, even with the tools in our hands, the studies that are ongoing, the treatments that have happened, there's a huge access problem. And trying to understand where the barriers are. We went throughout the communities to really understand. We tried to make it more grassroots. We tried to get into the community, speak to the patients themselves, speak to their caregivers, speak to patient advocates, understand what are the biggest barriers. And 4 of them rose to the top, understanding options at every step of their journey. The other was getting to the right care. And you're talking about practical problems that we don't think about. When people are diagnosed, you can imagine just the emotional burden that they go through. You can imagine their day to day. These people are working, they have families, they have things they have to deal with, and yet they just got diagnosed with something that will change their lives. So the emotional burden piece is real. And then the last piece that really rose to the top was addressing disparities and inequities when it came to care. So with those 4 pieces, that I guess 4 barriers that rose to the top, we put a call for proposals basically and said, we want to work with anybody. We want to give you funding. We want to give you support if you can help us address these issues. And we wanted innovative, practical solutions. And so when we saw Jenny's proposal, it fulfilled all those 4 criteria, but not only that, it was really thoughtful. It went into the communities. It was about building real infrastructure in the communities, because part of it is, when you think about patients, a lot of them have to come out of their communities into these big research centers in order to get the best care. And a lot of the patients that are diagnosed with multiple myeloma live in the communities. And what Jenny did in her proposal was actually go into their communities and create the right infrastructure, give the right support, so that the community can have a sustainable model for care. So I was blown away by her proposal. We were all blown away by her proposal, and we want to support it in every way we can, because we do believe and we know it will make a real impact. And if we can create that model, how do we then start to replicate it? So after seeing it, we were all in, and again, a phenomenal proposal. And on top of that, she's done amazing work. And so she's already shown that she can do it, and we're just very, very, very optimistic that it will be fun and really make a tremendous impact.
And how did it feel to be selected as a winner?
Oh, well, it was pretty filling. We've put we've worked on the foundation for 10 years, and we've built all these foundational programs that I thought would be effective for everyone. Except when you go into what Tanya is saying is real. 80% of myeloma patients are being seen in the community oncology setting. They don't even know that they should go see a specialist. We did kind of this cross-country tour when we launched one of our tools, and we sat next to patients while they entered different treatments they had had. It was so clear that they were being mistreated or undertreated. When we did that, especially in the community centers, versus big cities or whatnot, people near academic centers. But most of these patients don't even know that they are supposed to have a specialist, that they can live 3 to 5 years longer with a specialist on their team, crafting their care, because myeloma is so nuanced and you can personalize it like that. So it's just, yeah, it's this to address this lack of knowledge. So we were thrilled because last year we had decided this is something that we're going to go after. So we had a small kind of entry program to say, now how do we get into these community centers? We have these broad programs. We have over 10 programs, like a coach program and a university and a news site. And so we have all this infrastructure in place already. We have patient navigators. And then we have kind of a patient data portal where patients can share their information, which is pretty unique to a patient advocacy group. But then we decided to make this commitment to it. So we now have a Black director of the program, and we have someone who's leading something very specific, Val, who's doing our work on like a support group, but online support group everywhere, and a Facebook group. And so this was a build on to that. They really gave us input that, no, this is, we need our own website. And to me, kind of at first I was like, what? You need your own website? What is that? That doesn't make sense to me. These resources are for everybody. And they said, no, the messaging has to be different. We want to be talked to in a different way. We want a different approach that makes sense to us, that's more personal, that's more relationship based. And so it opened my eyes to just the fact that different types of patients need different things. And it's a thrill to be able to have the support, to be able to do that and go into the community and say, we're going to run a pilot program. We're going to create a new website for you. We're going to, shine on the Black community and the Spanish speakers, and really go after those groups who are struggling the most. And like Tanya said, you get diagnosed in the community clinic, you just do whatever your doctor tells you, especially if you don't have medical education that you need to be proactive about your choices. You're just going to go, oh, I just was diagnosed with this disease I never heard of before, and my doctor said I should do X, and I'm going to do that. You don't even know that there are all these different options, and that your first choice is your longest remission. Like that, you just don't know. And you have these wonderful community docs who are trying to treat 25 cancers, and myeloma might be 3 patients in their practice, and they just do not understand how to treat myeloma in general. Although I don't know how they do what they do, because it's amazing what they do, but it's tough for them because myeloma is not an easy disease to treat.
And I'll tell you, one of the other things I really loved about your program is empowering patients to understand their disease, to make the right decisions for them. And just even to your point, when they listen to just anyone, you give up a lot of your inability to think through what's best for you. And not every treatment is best for you. Not every decision is best for you. And I love the fact that you're educating them so that they can make these decisions. The decisions are now in their hand with their physician. And the other piece that, I've learned is, even when it comes to your point in terms of Spanish speaking, and you have that whole translational piece, something as simple as that is so important. Putting it in the language that people understand, that people can really relate to, and then make the right decision for them. It's the little things that a lot of times we don't think about, but that are so impactful, and that makes a big difference in the lives of people who are diagnosed. So your attention to details, thinking through how a person diagnosed needs to receive information, empowering them to make the right decisions for themselves, it becomes so personal and so important. And I think that, again, will help them. A lot of barriers, plus the practical barriers that are in their way, the day-to-day barriers you address.
Everything is patience. And so we go, I get to the clinic and then this happens, or, my doctor says this, or I don't understand that. And so how am I going to overcome that? And then you layer on top like a language barrier, or not even knowing what your doctor is saying. And then all this medical terminology. So, like we have patient navigators who can say, I'll prep you before you go in. I'll help you write up some questions for you to ask your doctor next. And have you had this test done, or what's next, or what is stem cell transplant like, or or what is this kind of therapy like, so you can kind of prepare them for what's going to happen next. And some of this just going into the clinic and meeting with patients. I was talking to a researcher in New York City, so major facility, and he said, there's nobody on my team that speaks Spanish here except me. He's from Mexico, but he said, I have no nurse navigator, and his, at least 30% of his patient base all are Spanish speakers, and and then the other 70% are African Americans. So he said, well, I have a Black nurse, so that's good, and she's helping, but yeah, you just have to address things in different ways.
Okay, what is next for the Health Tree Foundation and your collaboration with GSK? Yeah, Jenny, if you want to start with that one.
What's next is implementing this. Like Tanya said, we're very practical. I'm very practical about my own care. I'm very practical on behalf of the patients that we serve. And so it's walking through things, and it's okay if something doesn't work. We just say, that didn't work, we're going to try something else. But I feel like now that we have Black leadership in place to kind of steer us in the right direction, like this is how we talk to the community, or these are the partnerships that we need. We'll continue to partner with GSK on this initiative and practically do it. We're doing pilots, in-clinic pilots. We're doing outreach to the community centers directly. So what are the barriers there? We find some because they're overwhelmed or they don't know, yeah. So there are things we're learning as we go along the way. We'll expand the website and continue growing that and the outreach for that website. So we're working on a lot of different partnerships in place, and that could be sororities or fraternities, that could be Black health organizations, and things like that. So we have a lot we still have to do, and we'll just keep going.
And Tanya, what do you think about the future and your future collaboration with Health Tree Foundation and other people within the industry working towards making a difference for multiple myeloma patients?
So to the first piece, to answer your question in terms of collaborating with Health Tree Foundation, part of the promise from us, GSK, is the winners will get our full support. Obviously, as a pharmaceutical company, we have a lot of resources. We have very savvy tech people. We have, across the gamut of experience we have within GSK. So one of our pieces is we do something called what we call mission matching. So basically, we understand what your mission is. We have ours. We look where their overlap is, and how do we now synchronize our skill set together to really amplify impact. So whatever support Danny needs, we are there. It's not just handing over money and then walking away. It's really about creating the sustainable partnership and making sure that we could support her throughout this whole program and process. And then also learning from it. I mean, as Jenny continues to, and her foundation continues to understand the barriers and overcome the barriers, how do we create a standardized approach in doing that? And then how do we replicate that model beyond? Because, while this is really focused in the US, look across the world when it comes to multiple myeloma, a lot of those barriers overlap. So then how do we learn from Jenny's program and then help use that understanding and leverage and mitigation to across the globe. So that's going to be another big piece that we're going to do, but obviously in collaboration with the Health Tree Foundation. In terms of collaborating with other but just in general with the industry and to me, actually the whole healthcare ecosystem, that is important. We cannot do this alone. And one of the things that I hope to come out of just even Target the Future is collaboration. It's nothing for us to own as a pharmaceutical company. I want the whole healthcare industry to be in this together. Every sector has a strength. How do we come together and strengthen our impact together? So this is going to go beyond just Target the Future. This is hopefully setting the precedence for the future types of collaboration with patient advocacy groups, with payers, with other pharmaceutical companies, with physicians, with patients, with policymakers, with caretakers. We want to come together and understand the real challenges, and let's pull our resources together. Let's pull our brains together and work to again, go to cure and fix the challenges that we see together. That's the only way it's going to work. One group cannot own a solution. We've got to do it together, and we're ready.
Okay, and then finally, are you both optimistic about the future of multiple myeloma care? Yeah, Jenny, if you'd start with that one as well.
Sure. I'm very optimistic about the future of myeloma care. We have the right attention on this disease. We have great researchers working on this disease. We have a myriad of companies working on this disease and who are very, very committed to this space. And we have a very engaged patient population. We're here at a meeting actually right now. And it's just so fun to walk around and see the very collegial nature of the physicians interacting with each other too. It's a very unique space, and everybody, like Tanya said, is working in that space towards this cure idea. So I'm very hopeful as a patient that we'll keep going. The advancements have been happening fast, and I can't wait to see what happens in the next even couple of years.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I look at the advancement over the last 10 years when it comes to multiple myeloma, and you just see this, I mean, huge uptick right now. And we are all in. Look at, I mean, the big pharmaceutical companies, the biotechs, everyone. And then again, I mean, look at the patient advocacy groups, really strong. And what I'm noticing is this unified force. And we're driven. And so I actually think this is just even the beginning of what's to come. So fully optimistic that not only are you going to have just, again, across the whole healthcare ecosystem, people all in, but I think we're going to do it together. So yeah, very optimistic. And I'm looking forward to what's going to come together with Health Tree Foundation and together across the healthcare ecosystem.